A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy. That bomb has more power than 20,000 tons of TNT.
Harry S. Truman took a stand to quickly end the war with Japan in 1945 by dropping 2 atomic bombs on 2 separate cities. But Truman's tipping point to make the decision to drop the most terrible bomb in the history of the world was made when Russia attacked the Japanese. By dropping the second atomic bomb, Truman ended the war and sent the Russians a message. They also took the first and only shot that ignited the Cold War. The Americans did not enter the war until December 7, 1941, after their attack on Pearl Harbor. Before dropping the atomic bomb, America had been fighting for roughly 3 years in Europe and the South Pacific, and over 400,000 Americans had died. Japan killed several prisoners of war, POWs, every week, and according to historian David Kennedy, 90% of American prisoners of war in the Pacific reported being beaten. More than a third died. Those who survived spent 38 months in captivity on average and lost 61 pounds. Japan terrorized U.S. POWs, and thousands had died over the course of war. Truman knew that Japan was terrorizing thousands of POWs. Having found the bomb, he said, "We have used it. We have used it against those who have attacked us without warning at Pearl Harbor, against those who have starved and beaten and executed American prisoners of war, against those who have abandoned all presence of obeying international laws of warfare. We have used it in order to shorten the agony of war, in order to save the lives of thousands of young Americans." In a letter 2 days later, Truman wrote, "Nobody's more disturbed over the use of the atomic bombs than I am, but I was greatly disturbed by the unwarranted attack by Japanese on Pearl Harbor and the murder of our prisoners of war." One documented murder incident was on Palawan, a narrow island in the eastern Philippines. The Japanese 14th Area Army commander was General Tamayuka Yamashita. His men, to prevent the rescue of POWs on Palawan, herded the remaining 150 prisoners of war at Puerto Rico Princesa into 3 covered trenches, December 14, 1944. The trenches had been dug earlier as air raid shelters. One man, after noting there were no approaching planes, refused to go in the trenches. A Japanese officer cleaved his head in 2 with his sword. The Japanese then poured aviation fuel into the trenches and set them afire. The POWs who tried to escape the inferno were shot. Others attempted to escape by climbing over a hill that abutted on one side of the trenches. They were also hunted down and killed. Only 11 men escaped the massacre, according to Japanese treatment of World War II prisoners of war, POWs. Truman's motive to drop the atomic bomb was complex, but according to Why Did the U.S. Drop Atomic Bombs on Japan, dropping the atomic bomb was the best decision that President Truman had. Everything else would have killed thousands of people and wouldn't have helped the U.S. that much. Everyone agrees that the American casualties were expected to be very high, but how many would have died is up for debate. Between 2 and 4 million Americans would have been killed, according to William Shockley, who was asked by the Department of War to prepare a report. According to National Park Service, another option was to demonstrate the power of the atomic bomb to frighten the Japanese into surrendering. An island target was considered, but it raised several concerns. First, who would Japan select to evaluate the demonstration and advise the government? A single scientist? A committee of politicians? How much time would have lapsed before Japan communicated its decision? And how would that time be used to prepare for more fighting? Would a nation surrender based on the opinion of a single person or a small group? Second, what if the bomb turned out to be a dud? This was a new weapon, not clearly understood. The world would be watching the demonstration of a new weapon so frightening that an enemy would surrender to it without a fight. What if this super weapon didn't work? What would encourage Japan to fight harder? Third, there were only 2 bombs in existence at the time. More were in production. But, dud or not, was it worth to expend 50% of the country's atomic arsenal in a demonstration? Shockley wrote, "If the study shows that the behavior of nations in all historical cases comparable to Japan's, has in fact been invariably consistent with the behavior of the troops in battle. Then it means that the Japanese dead and ineffectives at the time of the defeat will exceed the corresponding numbers for Germans. In other words, we shall probably have to kill at least 5 to 10 million Japanese. This might cost us between 1.7 and 4 million casualties. This report had a huge influence on Truman's decision to drop the bomb. Shockley's estimates were 10 times the size of the number of people that died from the 2 atomic bombs. Dropping the bomb was a horrible decision, but it was the best decision that Truman had. Truman and his advisors know how serious this decision was, but I think they saw it as maybe not the best option, but the least bad option he had, said Michael Nyberg, chair of war studies at the Army War College. Truman was ready. It was August 6, 1945, and Colonel Paul Tibbets was boarding on the Enola Gay with a bomb that weighed 9,700 pounds, the first atomic bomb, and it was going to be dropped on Hiroshima. That one bomb killed approximately 80,000 people. My God, what have we done? Colonel Paul Tibbets said. The U.S. expected Japan to immediately surrender, but Japan failed to surrender. 2 days later, the USSR declared war against Japan. Truman didn't want Russia and its communist influence to invade Japan. Harry Truman decided to drop the second bomb on Nagasaki on August 9th, right before midnight. Russia immediately stops the invasion. The Russians were the reason that Truman dropped the second bomb. Harry Truman took a stand when he made the decision to drop the atomic bomb. It ended the world's most deadly war. It saved American lives, and it opened a new age of military technology. However, Truman dropped the second bomb to stop and intimidate communist Russia. It was a warning shot for a future nemesis. Today, 9 different countries have a nuclear bomb that can destroy more than Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But since the birth of that destruction, no one has ever attempted to use what Truman called the most terrible bomb in the history of the world. By taking a stand and dropping the atomic bomb, he ended World War II and fired the first and only shots to begin the Cold War. Let's hope that no one has to take such a horrible stance ever again.
Fellow Americans, Supreme Allied Commander General MacArthur and Allied representatives on the battleship Missouri in Tokyo Bay. The thoughts and hopes of all America, indeed of all the civilized world, are centered tonight on the battleship Missouri. There, on that small piece of American soil, anchored in Tokyo Harbor, the Japanese have just officially laid down their arms. They have signed terms of unconditional surrender. Our first thoughts, of course, thoughts of gratefulness and deep obligation, go out to those of our loved ones who have been killed or maimed in this terrible war. On land and sea and in the air, American men and women have given their lives so that this day of ultimate victory might come and assure the survival of a civilized world. No victory can make good their loss. Victory always has its burdens and its responsibilities as well as its rejoicing. But we face the future and all its dangers with great confidence and great hope. America can build for itself a future of employment and security. Together with the United Nations, it can build a world of peace, founded on justice, fair dealing, and tolerance. As President of the United States, I proclaim Sunday, September the 2nd, 1945, to be VJ Day, the day of the formal surrender of Japan. It is not yet the day for the formal proclamation of the end of the war, nor of the cessation of hostilities. But it is a day which we Americans shall always remember as a day of retribution, as we remember that other day, the day of infamy.